Hi, my name's Sean, and welcome to my channel, The Agency Advantage, where you can find out what it's like to work in pharma and also hints and tips for how to find a job in pharma. Hit like and subscribe for more helpful tips for how to find a job in pharma. Hi, everyone. So, on today's episode of the podcast, I'm going to go through some questions that I've received, just because I know that there's quite a few burning questions that you all have. And I thought it would be good to cover those in an episode. So I have a list right here, and I'll just get going and go through them. I have one question on, are there any particular roles, pharma roles, that are maybe the best for a medical writer? So I think medical writers are quite diverse, and it really depends on the type of medical writing and type of personality, I think, always. I was a medical writer myself. I wouldn't say I was a particularly traditional medical writer in the sense that I don't think I was super introverted, for example. And I was quite a creative medical writer. And I know that some medical writers, I would say, are more technical. So I think if you're quite a creative person, then roles like scientific communications or commercial or those slightly more creative roles can be a really good fit, or even patient engagement. It really depends on your areas of expertise and interest. So if you're working on patient materials and you're really passionate about that, then a patient engagement or patient partnership type role could be really good. Just a quick note from our sponsors, Pulsetto. I've been using the Pulsetto for around 6 months now. I find it really easy to use, and just with a busy life, like I have a son, I have a very stressful job, and I need something to help me relax and help me to ensure that I get a really good night's sleep. So that's why I use the Pulsetto. Very easy to use. There are sort of 5 to 10 minute programs and different intensities. And I just like the fact that you can do it while you're kind of watching TV or working at your desk. Pulsetto are kindly doing a discount for all my listeners. And if you use the code agency101 at the checkout, you'll get 5% off. For those who are more coming with a bioscience PhD, they've got maybe a research background and they got into medical writing, you might even find that a clinical science role might be a good fit as well. So yeah, I think there's multiple roles that could be possible. If you come from a regulatory writing route, then you might want to consider regulatory affairs roles. So I think there's a few different options available depending on what your interests are and what your skills are. I'm going to take a step back now, because you'll probably see different jobs going on LinkedIn. I want to take a step back and go, okay, what kind of companies should I be looking for, and what kind of roles, what kind of search terms and things? Because I've noticed there's quite a few influencers, people out there, and they talk about roles for nurses entering biotech, roles for doctors entering biotech. I just want to clarify that the term is pharmaceutical company or pharma company, but companies that tend to deal with biological drugs or materials, so things like vaccines, antibodies, if they're on the smaller side, then they might be called a biotech. So you might hear things referred to a biotech company. So pharma company might be, for example, a big pharma company like Novartis or Roche or GSK. And then you have your smaller biotech companies that might be like Biogen or Regeneron, for example. Those are good examples of biotech companies. And then you have your device companies. So these are companies like Medtronic, and they make medical devices, whether that's an insulin pump or a stent or something. Those are those types of companies, and they have slightly different regulations to pharma companies. So I think if you're creative in what things you search for, either on LinkedIn jobs or other job sites, there are multiple kind of options available. There are even companies that, like Nestle Health Sciences, that they work in a quite a scientific way, but really they're working on, I would say, more nutraceutical. So if you're really creative in your job search, then you can find some opportunities outside of the kind of typical companies and typical opportunities. That's about the companies. And the other question that I get a lot of the time, and it's something that I used to grapple with as well, is the job applications, regardless of whether it's for an MSL, whether it's for medical director. I've even seen jobs for scientific communications director. They often say, oh, you need a medical degree, or they might say a pharmacy degree, or they might say a PhD. In my experience, they're actually working from templates. So you don't necessarily need those qualifications, actually. If you have experience, and especially if you have experience in the disease area or you have research experience, then I would go ahead and apply for those roles and almost ignore the qualifications that you need, because I think experience counts for much more, and don't limit your options. If they really want somebody with a medical degree, then so be it. But I would just say go for it. I also wanted to address something that I see quite commonly out there. The types of roles where if you have a clinical background, like nursing or a doctor or a pharmacist or a physiotherapist, that can be really valuable because you actually understand the needs of the patients, you understand the disease area. So, for example, if you're a cardiovascular nurse, for example, why not look for medical affairs roles, clinical roles, even commercial roles in those disease areas and just go for it? This is really a valuable experience. Recently, I was just talking to a physiotherapist. He'd moved to a new country and was looking for a role. And I said, have you considered contacting companies that have neuromuscular pipelines? Because they might actually need a physiotherapist. You've been working with those patients, you've been treating those patients. So why not go for medical affairs roles or even clinical roles? Because in my past, I've worked with physiotherapists in clinical trials. Yeah, why not? Just absolutely go for it. Another question that I get asked often is, what are the creative roles in pharma? You'll see a lot of roles cropping up, and I think that's because of pharma digital transformation in recent years. So you'll probably see a lot of digital roles like omnichannel, digital marketing, things like that coming up. I think those can be really exciting. You might get to work on really cool projects and be able to partner up with either the commercial or the kind of medical function to deliver some really interesting projects, maybe even related to AI. You never know. So I think that can be really good if you're into digital and you're really creative. But I do think the scientific communications role is a really good one because you get to do really creative projects like narratives, working on events, working on omnichannel as well, medical education. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Obviously, commercial almost goes without saying, really creative role. And this is a good question. So what's the hardest thing about coming into pharma from either an agency or another role? So you're coming in without any experience. And I think for me, it was probably, I wasn't really used to the corporate environment. So even though I'd worked in big CROs, contract research organizations with, say, 10,000 employees, when you work in big pharma with sort of 90,000 employees, you can't imagine how many people you're dealing with on a daily basis. It's really quite something. And it takes a bit of getting used to. And I think in hindsight, I probably, if I'd have the knowledge that I have now, the first thing I would have done would have really been to not read up on the therapy area as such, even. I would have probably just spoken to people and asked them questions and find out what they did, find out what they need from me, how they like to work, what their goals are, just so you can understand, okay, this is a person I need to go to for this. I have this issue that I need their advice, or they're the person that needs to review this, that they're an advocate, they're not. I think it's really useful to understand your internal stakeholders. So that's something that I found really difficult, because when you work in a small company, you really only work with a team of, say, maximum 10 people, and that's it. And if you're coming from agency, or if you're coming from the lab, it's a similar thing. You're working largely on your own or in a small team. So I think that kind of big corporate environment is very difficult to get used to when you're not used to it. So there's another question that I've had, and I think this is a really tricky one, so I will save it for another episode. So stay tuned. But what does medical affairs do? So I'll do that for another episode. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like and follow and share with anyone you think would really enjoy this. And I'll see you next time.